Imagine a world that looks a lot like ours, yet survival is so desperate that families sell their own children to corporations. Now meet Lauren Olamina, a teenage girl who believes humanity's only hope is a new way of thinking, a new religion built on change. If you met her, would you follow her? I'm Space Admiral Candace.
I'm Space Cadet Shane, second class.
And you are listening to Sci-Fi Book Pod. Today we're chatting about Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler with our visiting dignitary, feminist business coach, Becky Mollenkamp. Welcome, Becky. Thank you for having me, reporting for duty. I love it. I love it. Please tell us why you chose this book.
I have had a history of saying I don't like sci-fi. And when you started this podcast, I was very excited and I was thinking, I don't really like sci-fi. But then I realized that this book is considered sci-fi. And so maybe I do like sci-fi to a degree. I think I always thought sci-fi was like aliens and future worlds and other lands and people fighting and wars and all of that. That was my sort of thinking of sci-fi. Definitely centered around aliens. I'm not a big alien person. Great for all the people who are, but it wasn't for me. And so I always sort of just thought sci-fi is not for me. And I read this book and realized I kind of like dystopian books, but especially those that are written through a different perspective than my own. And so Octavia Butler's a Black woman and her perspective is very different on the future. And it just opened my eyes to like, oh, maybe there are types of sci-fi that I actually do like. And this was sort of my gateway into that.
Yeah, speculative fiction.
Yeah. And Afrofuturism, which is a term I've since learned as well, it's sort of speculative fiction that centers the Black experience, particularly reimagining worlds where the Black experience looks different than it has historically looked.
That's the first time I've heard that phrase too, and I like it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the term was coined by a white man, of course. So there are some folks who have some issues with it, but on the whole, I think a lot of folks still use that term. And Octavia Butler is kind of considered like the godmother of Afrofuturism.
So, the whole time I was reading this book, I kept thinking about Mormonism and the founding of the Mormon religion. Except, in my opinion, the religion that Lauren is creating, called Earthseed, makes a lot more sense than Mormonism.
I mean, the heart of the religion is just basically change happens, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's kind of it.
Yeah.
But not just change happening, but we can guide that change in a direction that's positive.
Yeah.
And that's the thing about this book. There's so much positivity, and then that gets stolen away from us very quickly.
Well, I feel like, to me, honestly, I think it ends on in a positive place of hope, of there is still hope for us, right? Because it's about, I think the message that I really love with it is this idea of community. And again, I think Black women in particular have a unique perspective that allows for a different visioning of what the future can look like in the midst of all the worst stuff happening, right? Because the Black experience is very different than our experience. The Black experience is an experience of always knowing adversity, always of survival, right? All through history, right? At least through American history, the Black experience has been one of having to survive adversity. And how do they do that? Through community and through hope, right? You have to be able to imagine something better to be able to get through all that adversity. And I think that comes through in the story of like this idea of hope, and that the way we do that is through community and together, and we will support each other. And I feel like this moving towards a promised land, a new place, a place where we can start again, where we can create a better future together. I think there's hope in that.
One of the things that I enjoyed about this story is the way Lauren made everyone, regardless of who they were or what their background was, feel welcome in their community. Even when other people were pushing back and saying, no, we shouldn't let anybody else in, she kept saying, yes, we need the more people we have in our group, the safer we are and the better things are. And it didn't matter what that person looked like or what they had done before.
Yeah. Well,
Huh.
she suffers. So in the book, she suffers from hyper empathy, which I think suffers from, right? So it's treated as like an ailment or a problem that she has, right? There's this condition of hyper empathy. And I think that's such an interesting part of the story too, because I think that it speaks to how leadership might look different if people had more empathy, if our leadership was rooted in empathy versus what I think it often is, which is that thing you're talking about of like othering, of fear, of survival and pushing people away. What if our leadership was rooted in this like really deep empathy for all humans experience of humaning? And I feel like I'm certainly think that was an intentional choice by Octavia Butler to show that this thing that is being treated as a problem is actually perhaps the thing that's most like special and wonderful about her and what makes her positioned to be a leader and one that people will listen to, and that provides sort of this like idea of hope for what is possible and what might be able to come next and what they might be able to build.
It was pretty incredible that along the journey, she met more people that also suffered from the same ailment.
Right.
When I kept thinking, this is just evolution.
Well, no, it was because her mother took some kind of drugs, wasn't it?
Yeah. During
Yeah. So
pregnancy.
yeah. It was something
Oh,
like
I
that.
missed that part.
So this is a side effect of that or something like that.
Some drug that, yeah, I mean, I think it was
Yeah.
like imaginary.
So let's put this in perspective for our audience. This was a community somewhere in southern LA, close to it,
Yeah. Just outside
somewhere,
LA. Yeah.
somewhere. Anyway, it was a community. Think of a subdivision that basically the world the United States actually has collapsed. I don't think that the rest of the world really has the same. And I think the rest of the country is somewhat functional uh, because they're still voting for presidents and so on. But the thing is, the West Coast has totally has collapsed. Uh, and they're still going to the moon, or they were still spending money to the moon and shooting rockets off the moon. So you really have basically a government or a scenario where basically what we're trying to do now is create a bunch of business people and this, that, and the other thing, and we'll just go shooting the moon. The hell with the rest of you guys.
It sound
And so
familiar?
yeah. So the subdivision, basically just if you think about a subdivision, they gated off the subdivision. People are in there and safe. It's kind of like us and them kind of scenario. There's thieves and bad guys outside the gate. But sooner or later, the subdivision, everything collapses due to just the outside ruffians or thieves or murderers or whatever you want to call it. So they kill her entire family and so on, and then they travel. They have to leave, and then they go into LA, don't they? Somewhere.
Yeah. She has to journey through, and the goal is to get north. They're trying to head like to the
Yeah,
Pacific
yeah.
Northwest.
So here, this is my take on this. It's kind of um, it is a dystopian, but also it's kind of like, okay, if you think about the little band she's getting together, and if you think about nomads, cave people, or how we prehistoric people, that numbers survive. If you have numbers, you will survive. And so what she was trying to do, or what they were doing, was gathering up as numbers. A person here with skill, somebody here with skill. What could you contribute? And are you a threat to the tribe? Okay. First, they have to figure that one out, right? Do we take this person in? Are they going to be a threat? Are they going to be a liability? Are they going to contribute? And even if they can't contribute, is it ethical to just leave somebody on the street and let them die? So you're dealing, but if you think about it, this is exactly how tribes were formed.
Mhm.
Is that the village or whatever was left of the village? Let's go back 50,000 years or whatever, and they had to leave the environment because, let's say, a pride of lions showed up or something else, or another tribe showed up, and they're cannibals. So you have to leave. So as you're leaving, scraggling, you don't know where you're going. You say their promised land is over there and this, that, and the other thing. How do you get people to keep on moving? Now she's already created this philosophy in her subdivision kind of thing. So she takes that with her. And as people kind of lose hope here and there, she kind of installs or puts her work into practice as she does this. And so it's kind of like, this is the test. This is the test tribe kind of thing.
Yeah.
And as she does it, and as she does this, she's actually finding out it does work, has grounding, and it does help. And she doesn't stray away. She goes, well, it's kind of like it's almost like basically how Islam went on top of Christianity. Christianity went on top of Judaism. And this is actually goes on top of Christianity, of all the other ones. Because she doesn't like that. What she does is basically define what God is, which is change. Everything is changing. Don't grab onto it. Don't hold on to it. Doesn't matter. It's going to change on you. And as soon as you try to hold on to it, all right, that's where you'll fall. That's because they're always walking.
Yeah.
All right. And so they have to keep moving. And then they have this dream of basically having this place where they can settle. All right.
Acorn. Yeah.
Acorn.
Her land. I mean, she wrote this book in the late 80s.
Yeah.
And I mean, people talk often about how she was very prescient because even the dates, I mean, to 2024 and the election that's happening there was, eerily, eerily similar to where things are. And the corporate ownership structure I think the writing's been on the wall for a long time in America, right? And the 80s are an interesting time for her to be thinking about that thing, right? We're in the Reaganomics. She's writing this while the trickle-down nonsense is happening, and there's a real shift in America towards that, like, idea around protecting corporations and business at all costs, and even that move that eventually did happen of, like, corporations having humanity, according to the Supreme Court, right? So she saw a lot of the writing on the wall. And the one thing I wanted to mention too, and climate change, by the way, because that's the other big factor
that's
here.
right.
And it's climate change along with this corporatization that's all kind of happening. And it's not, I don't think it's terribly surprising that LA is one of those early places where all of this is beginning to just crumble and weaken given the population center and where they are located as far as environmental concerns. But you mentioned about she has the philosophy, which I think is great because there's a lot of discussion. Is this a religion? Is it a philosophy? What is it, right? But also I just think it's worth noting that her father was a preacher.
Yeah.
Right? And then in that commune or whatever, the neighborhood that they've walled off for safety where she's existing, she's exposed to religion and him being a leader in their religion as a way of maintaining peace, of creating order, of keeping people kind of in line, and also not just the keeping them in line, but creating safety and community and, everyone kind of working towards the same goal. And that is what's part of keeping them safe in this big world. And she's young. Like, this is not an adult, older woman who's fleeing. She's a young person who's by necessity, because everyone in her life is being killed and there's nowhere safe now because her commune or her neighborhood has been infiltrated. She's out on her own as a young person. And so, of course, she kind of grabs for what she knows, I think, as a way of trying to create that feeling of safety for herself. So, I mean, she, like you said, she'd been coming up with these ideas for a long time inside of that space.
Right.
But I just think it's interesting. She's continuing that legacy of her father's and of having a belief system can be a valuable tool in being able to get people to follow you and to listen to you and to create some safety for you. So I'm from California, you know this, and I recently found out that you lived where I grew up for a short time.
Oh, wow. That's right.
And in this book, Octavia talks about, or they walk through Highway 156, which is where I grew up. And I'm like, they're walking, at this point, they're walking by my house. I lived in a house right where they're walking. I've been to this location. I've seen this lake. I know. So part of it's a lot like when I read Steinbeck novels. I can relate to the story because I have walked where they have walked. Did you feel that same way having lived in the Salinas Valley? I mean, I certainly recognized that, right? Like, yeah, but I don't know because I didn't grow up there. I only lived there for, a short period of time. So I can't say that I had that feeling probably to the degree you did. But I do always like when there is stuff that you feel touch points within a book that you can kind of grab a hold of to
Right.
help you feel like you're inside the story more. And I think also perhaps for books like this with sci-fi, like things that are otherworldly in whatever way that means, whether it's different timelines or whatever. I think it can be helpful to have those kind of things that you can help ground you into some feeling of like, oh yeah. And I think for me, that's part of my whole I don't love sci-fi feeling is that it doesn't feel I have a hard time with things that don't feel real. I also don't like horror for those reasons
No.
because
No.
not the scary part. I don't like scary stuff, but the kinds of horror that I'm like, I'll watch and I think this is just stupid is like ghost things because I don't particularly personally have a big belief system around ghosts or, anything that's like otherworldly because it just doesn't feel real. But now a horror story where they're in the woods at a cabin on a vacation and real people come and try to kill them or something, that will freak me out because that feels real. I can ground myself in that story and
Right.
then it starts
Right.
to like feel and so I like those I like something that I can say, there's something here I can hold on to because if there's nothing for me that I can hold on to, I have a really hard time caring. I don't like fantasy for that reason either because I often am like,
Well,
this
So
doesn't
you
feel
have
real.
you have to
so basically anything that's made up,
Well,
basically.
no, I mean
Uh,
everything can be made up.
Well,
It could
no,
be
what I'm
but
saying is that any kind of like technology or anything like fantasy or anything like that, it's kind of like magical, like
unless
Star
there's
Trek is going.
something that I can grasp a hold of
Right.
to say like, "Oh, I get that," right? Like,
Yeah.
I think the reason this story it works for me too is because there is so much of even though it was written 30 whatever, 40 years in the future of when she
Right.
wrote it, there's
Right.
so much that it's like, "Oh, yeah, I see that." And I just recently so this book opened me up to other sorts of Afrofuturism
Huh.
and speculative fiction books. So I read Sky Full of Elephants by Sibo Campbell, which is like the very beginning of the book. It's imagine a world where there's no white people, basically, right? So there's
Right.
like something that happens and there's just like no white people anymore. And that's a world I can't fully ground myself in, but because I think I've read some of these others, like because I also read Kindred after this, which is another Octavia Butler book that's amazing. That one looks backwards, like she goes back in time instead of forward. Um, but I don't know, there was something about Sky Full of Elephants that now I think if I had read that book years ago, I would have been like, I can't picture that world, so I have a hard time with
Uh-huh.
it. But I think because I've been reading some of these others, there was something in it that I was able to like hold on to now, having had more
Huh.
experiences with some of this other Afrofuturism that I was like, okay. So anyway, I don't know. This book has
Bec-
started to open me up to some other things.
Because
Like
most people who enjoy sci-fi, I can speak for myself, but most people I talk to from similar scenarios, is that besides being fun and start spaceships going pew pew, it's an escape. Okay, it's kind of like, especially Star Trek. Star Trek's more of an escape. It's kind of like let's get rid of the hunger. Let's get rid of this. Let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of it, and let's go off to the stars and meet all these aliens. Okay. And that's cool. That's fun. And that's almost like, oh, I wish that world was there. I wish that world was now. So it's kind of like an escape. All right. So most sci-fi falls in those categories of basically escaping, or basically like the book we have here, which is basically if society falls apart, where are we at? And then some books kind of like do both. It's just like, okay, so society falls apart, but we're in the future.
so Octavia Butler in the world of speculative fiction, most especially in this world of sort of like the Afrofuturism part of speculative fiction, is very beloved. Like Octavia Butler is is the god amongst goddesses, right? For many people. And one person there are Octavia Butler scholars, big time, right? Who have read everything she's ever done and who very much love her work. And one of those people would be Adrienne Marie Brown. Um, and she has a book called Emergent Strategy that I highly recommend because that book pulls from Earthseed. It's basically taking that and applying it to Like, what does that all mean in our lives now? And so I really recommend people who are interested, like if you like that piece of it, if you like the Earthseed part and you're interested more in that, her philosophy that's kind of presented, Adrienne Marie Brown really takes that philosophy and expands on it. And it's not fiction, it's a nonfiction book. And it's really helpful when relating to business as well. So for people who own businesses, but honestly, it's just good for life. It talks about sort of some core principles that are pulled out from that idea of God is change and some of the things that you get through those glimpses of Earthseed throughout the book, and applies it to life. So I highly recommend that book for anybody who, like you, who's like, I'm interested in this part, honestly, more than the story. Like, I want to know more of this philosophy. She does such a beautiful job of that. And it's fabulous. It pulls from that and then like nature. So if you've ever read Robin Wall Kimmerer, who wrote Braiding Sweetgrass and talks about indigenous cultures and how nature affects how we live, it's kind of like merging these worlds of indigenous learnings around nature and our relationship with nature and what we can learn from how nature behaves. And then this, like some of the stuff that Octavia is bringing, and puts together a really beautiful philosophy for life.
Well, I think that in Earthseed, she's talking about a future where they are traveling into space to save humanity. And that's part of Earthseed. And it got me to wondering, because the way that it was read during the story, did it actually happen? So I am curious about whether or not future books because there's Parable of the Talents and there's other books in the storyline, do they actually make it to space? And we are going to talk to Nicole Havelka about Parable of the Talents.
Oh my God, I have to listen. I'm so excited.
During the winter. It'll be a few months in the future.
That's great. I can't wait, because I started Parable of the Talents a while ago, like a long time ago. And then I don't know what it was. I had a harder time re-engaging because it's Lauren's daughter then in that book.
Oh. So it's a generation skip.
It's like it moves ahead. I think there's some acknowledgement of like the story and stuff, but it's a different timeline, but it's the same. And I think there's probably intentionally, right? So that moves that all forward, and we get to see what happened with Acorn and with some of the things you're talking about, like Earthseed, and how does that develop?
Acorn is the community in in Oregon, where they end up. And it's property that is owned by Lauren's boyfriend, whose name still escapes me. The man that Lauren ends up with is 30 years older than her. Taylor Franklin Bankole? Bankola.
Bankola? Taylor Franklin Bankola. There we go.
Yeah. Yes. Bankola. Okay. So he is a doctor, a physician, and so he knows how to heal people, and he has his property in Oregon, and that is where they when Lauren and her neighbors, the three of them, set out on their adventure, they have some old maps of the California highway system and the goal of just going north. But along the way, they meet Bankola, and he has this property in Oregon that he tells Lauren about, and then Lauren's like, well, that's where we need to go. But Bankola doesn't necessarily want the rest of the people to go with them. He's holding it back. Anyway, I had a real problem with their age difference. And I don't know if that's just that I'm in my 50s now and and times have changed.
With that. No, times have not changed. We still see it, by the way, because I was just talking to my husband about this last night, literally. And I said, you know what I admire is rich and or famous men who are in their 50s plus, who date women who are no more than 10 years younger than them. Because it never freaking happens. These men, as soon as maybe if they're still with somebody they've been with for a really long time, but they get that divorce, and then sure enough, I saw Bradley Cooper's dating somebody 20 years younger than him. And I'm just, it's still happening. And I think that does speak, though, to a power dynamic that exists that I think she's speaking about, right? That is, because that's an important way, I think, inside of this book to also show other ways, because she's talking about corporate power and political power. And this is another piece of systemic power where older men, frequently, who have more power, will bring along younger women who I believe that they are then able to more likely do some manipulation with, right?
But I
ahead.
think in this situation, the roles were reversed because Lauren seduced him and
Mhm.
Lauren is driving all the decisions.
Or is she?
Okay, so we've read a lot of different books, or we've listened to a lot
Sure.
of books so far. Okay, now I usually kind of like bef- bef- before then we kind of like just did the books we liked, and then we did this podcast, and now we're doing books that we don't even heard of before that probably we wouldn't pick. Like
Which
I
is
wouldn't pick this.
wonderful. I like it. I'm
All
learning,
right.
I'm reading things I never
So,
would
so
have read.
we're eating a lot of different food now that we didn't eat it before, right? We're not eating hamburgers and fries anymore.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. Before Shane and I met, he had never had Thai food, and now he loves Thai food. So
Okay.
sometimes when you try something new, you discover that you like it. Okay, Shane.
And you can also just say, I don't like it. This book
Uh-huh.
isn't for everybody, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Shane,
Um,
sorry
what?
we interrupted you.
Oh,
Go
okay.
on.
But no, I think I said this in a previous podcast, is that I find it interesting that on these futuristic books, somehow, some way, oh, it was Ender's Game, and you got a bunch of naked kids running around. All right. And there was another book, and I'm going, and it was like child marriage too, and I'm going, all right. So I'm seeing this pattern. All right. And even she writes it in, she puts it in there. And so, I mean, she didn't have to put it in there. She could have put to somebody who's not as old, but she deliberately did. So that tells me either, I don't know, it's just like, is this supposed to be acceptable or is this not? Because he even said, he goes, my sister ain't gonna like this. I'm not
Yeah,
gonna,
and he did resist her advances.
Yeah. So I don't know what the pattern is here. It is kind of creepy. Uh,
Yeah.
either in book form or basically real life. When oh, it was so it's just what I'm saying is that there's a pattern here of that, and I don't know where it's really coming from. I really don't know what's the meaning. Maybe it's a human thing. Who the hell knows?
Well, I think I think certainly with Octavia Butler, but I think a lot of sci-fi is about examining society and systemic, like, structures and things that we accept, and I think sometimes it can be about calling those things out. Sometimes it's about flipping them on their head. So, Candace, to your point, maybe part of it is, like, there's, like, this thing that we see all the time that's pervasive, and here's this way of saying we're gonna flip it on its head by having the woman, young woman, being the one who's sort of using him instead of the other way around. Like, but I think in general, these choices are usually choices that they make, like you said. Shane, I think it's usually a choice the author's making,
Yeah.
and so
Well,
I think
yeah,
it's
of course
really
they are.
worth examining because they could have chosen something different, especially with sci-fi where, because sometimes you say, well, they're products of their society, so they're just writing what they know, and
Right.
maybe they're not even
Right.
questioning it. But with sci-fi, these are people who spend a lot of time imagining what's possible, imagining different
Right.
worlds, thinking about what could change. So I think if they're intentionally making that choice inside of something that they've written, there's probably a reason. Now, we can't always know what it is, but it's certainly a reason that, if nothing else, it makes you question, right? And I think that's part
Well,
of
see,
what.
that's what I think where we're heading on that. I think
Yeah.
that we're flipping that taboo on its head, and it may be purposely doing so because it's really not a shock thing. It's just like she could easily made the guy 30.
Mhm.
You know,
But then
that
would
would
it be
have
as
that.
believable for the idea of him having this
That's true.
force,
That's
right?
true. That's true. That's
I don't
true.
know.
Be-
And it does still speak a
Because
bit
he's
to
a,
that.
he's a his wife died.
Mhm.
Okay. So, I mean, it's not like he was looking for romance kind of thing.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just basically saying that, how attraction and how love works is I don't know. I don't know.
Or the things
It's
we do
just
for survival.
yeah. Well, that's another thing. I thought about that too. And I'm going, you do have two lonely people here,
Mhm.
you know?
And 2 people who are
Uh,
desperate, especially her,
yeah.
of
And
Yeah.
like,
different.
They're both different from everybody else in the group.
Yeah.
Not that different's bad. It's just they're different.
No, but my mom said before she died, okay, and she looked at me, she goes, "I'm still that 12-year-old little girl, Shane." And just because the body's like this, that 12-year-old's still here. And I could tell you for a fact, I'm 90% of the time a 12-year-old boy getting into trouble, while the rest of me is just like, oh, I don't want to do this, but I got to be an adult.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. So why would that, uh, the companionship? And like you said, Candace, is that they're both different. They're both educated, and they both basically kind of like force. In other words, while the other ones were panicking, or they were doing something else, or they're concerned with their own things, though both of them were concerned about basically the tribe, where it was going, the makeup, and everything else.
Well, there's two kinds of survival. There's how do I get through today, and how do I get through my life. And how do we continue?
Yeah.
And Lauren and Bankole, they both were focused on how do we survive.
Yeah.
Where everybody else was more like how do I survive.
And also they both had strong ethics, kind of like we can't leave these people behind.
Yeah.
We can't do that.
It makes sense for them to be together. It just doesn't make sense for them to be together.
But again, author's job is an artist's job is to shake you up. I mean, that's
well, and to make you ask questions, right? Yeah. So if you're having the conversation about it, anything that makes you sort of stop and question. And again, I think that to me, that speaks to the systemic thing of it's making you stop and question about these dynamics that exist in our society. And I think with Octavia Butler anyway, that there is at least that intentionality of saying, I want to make anywhere I can, I'm going to like push at these differences that I'm seeing in my lived experience as a Black woman around race and gender. And so I do think it's really intentional. Whether we understand what it's about, it's certainly making you have that moment of questioning.
Well, we're talking about it.
Yeah. We could probably talk about it for another hour. However, it's time to wrap up. So, Becky, quickly tell the audience what you'd like them to know about you and how to get a hold of you. Sure. Well, I'm a feminist business coach, but primarily the reason I know Candace is because she's in the Feminist Podcasters Collective. And that's a space that I run for people who podcast and care about amplifying voices of under-recognized folks in the podcasting space, whether it's featuring a book by Octavia Butler or, just making sure that your lineup of guests looks more diverse. If you're interested in being a community with people like that, then check us out at feministpods.com, or you can go to beckymollenkamp.com and learn more about my work. And both of those links will be in the show notes. I have to say that joining the Feminist Podcasters Collective was one of the best choices that I made over the last couple of years for my show. And because of belonging to the FPC, I've made conscientious choices that have taken my main show, Gratitude Geek, to a level that I didn't expect. So thank you for creating a space that is where the women and the members, there's not just women in the group, where the members are intentional about helping each other and growing in the podcasting world. So thank you for what you're an incredible member. So thank you for being there. That's very nice. Let's wrap this up by each of us sharing who we think needs to read this book. Shane, you go first.
Well, okay. First of all, if somebody's going to pick up this book and they're expecting pew-pews, zombies, magical unicorns, or whatever, it's not going to happen. If you want to pick up this book and look at things at a different perspective, this is literature. It's not really sci-fi. I mean, it is sci-fi. There's two kind of categories. Sci-fi is somewhat is like entertainment. It's kind of like bubblegum crap. And that's fun. It's fun, And then there's literature side. And the literature side is totally different. It's kind of like a Shakespearean and it's kind of stuff. I would probably put this in the category of kind of like a Shakespearean stuff. Not everybody dies. Okay. They do survive, but there is tragedy and this, that, and the other thing. But if you just want to get a bite of a different author perspective, this is a good book. This is a really good book. Try to I would say try to get out of that buffet that only serves, meat, potatoes, and and so on, gravy.
Try some Thai food.
Yeah, try some Thai food once in a while. All right, and this will get you going. Even if you wanted to, because the Earthseed kind of philosophy, everything changes, or everything. What is it? Everything changes.
God has changed. Yeah.
God has changed.
Yeah, God has changed. Everything changes. That may work for you. That may be something that you're looking for. I think that's a big one of my biggest hangups is basically how humans can't associate. They don't understand what time is. Okay, they think time can stand still. Time never stands still. The Earth never stops spinning. That kind of thing. The reason why you don't know whether the Earth is spinning is because it never stops spinning. Kind of thing. So Earthseed is kind of like that. It's just like it never stops. And that's what you have to deal with, and that's what you have to get used to. And so every time they run into a problem, it's almost like, okay, things change. Okay. And so that for personal, this may be a good book for somebody who's looking for maybe a different kind of philosophy as well.
All right. So I agree. Change is good. So I have always been a fan of change. Even when I was Lauren's age, I thought change was good. So I really like the concept of Earthseed and the reframing of religion into something that moves you forward. Because a lot of people think about religion as an agnostic. I'm actually a universalist, not an agnostic, but as a universalist, sometimes I look at religion and think religion makes people go backwards or holds people back from progress. It can, but this religion was about moving forward. And I thought that was great. I mean, did I like all the parts? Like, no. I did not need to read about cannibalism, even though it was a very short section of the book. I didn't need to read about that. But there is enough character development and enough unique ideas. And again, it's a work of literature to keep me invested in wanting to know more and want to learn more. Yeah, for me, I think to all the white ladies who love Handmaid's Tale, I would say read this book, because I think that we white women who care about progress and who worry about what's happening in our world right now can get very fixated on our own lens and how those problems affect us. And I think that what I really think is important about this book and other works by Octavia Butler and other Black speculative fiction writers is that it can help us expand our understanding of the harms of our systems and of what could be coming to people who aren't just like us, right? And I think that's really important so that when we are fighting, our fight is not just about, oh no, Handmaid's Tale, but oh no, all of these other experiences as well. And so I really recommend it for, in particular for that audience, and for the fact that I really still feel like I left this book with hope. I left the book thinking, that's right, what saves us is not every man or woman for themselves, but what saves us is when we realize that we are all in this journey together and that we are all humans having a humaning experience, which is why I think reading a book like this alongside Handmaid's Tale is really important, so that our understanding of the collective need for change includes not just people who look like us, right? So that would be my recommendation. That was a really good call out. Handmaid's Tale and this book together are really interesting lens. That is a wrap on our discussion of Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler. I'm Space Admiral Candace.
I'm Space Cadet Shane, second class.
And I'm Becky Mollenkamp.
I don't have a title
distinguished
yet.
dignitary. A distinguished dignitary.
You're our visiting dignitary. Okay, do it again. And I'm a distinguished dignitary, Becky Mollenkamp.
There. My.
Thank you.
Pinkies up.
And you have been listening to Sci-Fi Book Pod.